Oh, hello everyone. Dave from We Heart Giant Robots here, and I happen to love shows that know how to play fast and loose with the established rules of their genres, because I am hipster scum, who likes feeling smug and superior to other people. Now, like all hipster scum, there's a particular series that a lot of people ignored or missed, but that I reckon is one of the most criminally underrated series of the 2010s. So, given that Rob's busy being worked to death during a global pandemic, thanks capitalism, I wanted to return to this particular series and show how it takes one of the most fundamental tropes of shonen anime, namely power escalation, and completely twists it on its head. That's right, motherfuckers, I'm yelling at you about Samurai Flamenco again, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. Before I cut loose and start explaining why a show with a 6.9 out of 10 rating on my anime list is actually incredible and why my anime list should be burnt to the fucking ground, we'll need to take a quick look at power escalation as a concept. So, what do I mean by power escalation? There's a few definitions you'll see bandied about, but essentially it's a means by which you can raise the tension and stakes for an ongoing story. It's a two-step process. Step 1, raise the power and potency of the skills and abilities your protagonist can throw about. If at the start of the series he can chuck fireballs, by season 3 he's a walking tactical nuclear explosion, that sort of thing. Step 2, raise the powers and threat level of the antagonist you're throwing at your characters. If the villain of the first arc is someone who's threatening to destroy a city, by season 3 the villain's capable of blowing up the entire planet, and you're thinking of Dragon Ball now. We're talking about Dragon Ball now. God fucking damn it. Now, for the most part, this model of power escalation absolutely works. It wouldn't be so ubiquitous in shonen anime if it didn't. The writers can scale things up, raise the stakes, and keep the audience engaged with increasingly more dramatic, flashy, and over-the-top spectacle, leaving them wondering where the series might be escalating to next. To a point. Familiarity breeds contempt. The first time powers escalate, it's awesome and dramatic. Same for the second time, maybe even the third. But eventually, if you keep repeating the same plot beats of new bad dudes doing bigger bad dude shit, which means bigger powers for the protagonist, the laws of diminishing returns start to bite in a big way. After a certain point, there's no tension left. You've got no doubts about the heroes pulling through. You're just watching them add a +1 onto the end of whatever god-tier ability they've been throwing around, and I promise you, I'm not just writing this segment as an attack on Dragon Ball Z. It's just that, as much as most of us love it, Dragon Ball Z runs into a lot of these issues. What's more, power escalation can reach a point where if a show just keeps ratcheting the numbers and power levels up,
11,
and most of the
11, and
amps go up to 10.
Exactly.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
it can lose a lot of the charm and creativity that ironically made the early storylines so memorable. This is a problem that Naruto apparently suffers from heavily. I wouldn't know, because if I admitted to watching Naruto, Rob would burn my house down, but you get my point.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
This is the central challenge of writing a story that uses power escalation. It can take you pretty far, but if you rely on it too much, you're going to bore and/or alienate the audience. Okay, so from this point on, we are going balls deep into spoilers for basically the whole of Samurai Flamenco. So if that's going to be an issue, go watch Samflam right the fuck now, and then come back. Or go watch the video we did on it previously, okay? Okay. The majority of Samurai Flamenco's episode run follows the conventions of power escalation, pretty much beat for beat. After the initial surprise tonal shift, writer Hideyuki Kurata continues raising the stakes in new and increasingly ridiculous ways. Hazuma decides to become a superhero because he's retarded, and goes from fighting street criminals to guillotine gorillas to giant monsters to the actual president of Japan who is powered by his approval ratings, and then finally alien demigods in space. Then he meets God. Seriously, if that sentence alone didn't sell you on this show, I question whether you've ever had fun in your life. So you hit episode 19, and you're probably wondering how the hell they're going to raise the stakes higher than going to space and fighting aliens. After all, the show set the expectation that it will escalate things and shift its tone up without warning. By now, though, you're sort of expecting it to grow more over the top. There's only so far the writers can push power escalation without it running into the issues described previously. Surely there's no more proper surprises Samurai Flamenco can pull.
That's where you're wrong, kiddo.
Kurata is a crafty motherfucker, you see, and he's been preparing one last shift in tone for a long time. He's going to knock viewers for six with a very particular method of raising the stakes, and in doing so, he's going to subvert the standard shonen format, which is to say, he's going to use power incomparables. I mean, I don't know if that's exactly how we'd refer to it. That's a term I'm stealing from Hello Future Me. But let me explain. Anime protagonists fighting increasingly more dangerous villains who exist on the same power scale as they do is a totally fine and dandy way of doing business. But as we've established, it can get a bit samey after a while. Now, a clever writer understands that this isn't the only way to challenge their protagonist. Instead of just having another, stronger version of the previous villain who's even more menacing and whose plan is even more evil, they can deploy an antagonist who utilizes entirely different skills and approaches to oppose the protagonist, whose outlook and goals are entirely different to what's come before. This is a power incomparable antagonist. A pretty well-established example is the Joker of DC fame. In a straight-up fight against Batman, a god-tier martial artist who goes through goons like they're made of fucking rice paper, he's gonna get beaten half to death every single time. But that's not how he challenges Batman. The Joker isn't a physical threat, but a moral and emotional one. In a lot of Batman media, his goal is to push his nemesis over that thin line that separates vigilante from villain, to make him have that one bad day. What makes a villain like this so disturbing and engaging is that, all too often, the hero doesn't have a readily available means of fighting back against them. Batman can go toe-to-toe with some of the most powerful brutes in DC canon, but against the Joker's mind games, he's often pushed to breaking point. Samurai Flamenco understands Escalation better than pretty much any series I've seen released in the last decade, which means that it understands the impact of a power incomparable antagonist. Enter stage left, this horrible little grey-haired This is Haiji Sawada, and he's here to make sure that Hazama has a very bad time. He's also completely different to the villains that have showed up in this series so far. He's not a monster, he's not a fighty man, he's not out to take over or destroy the world. His focus, singularly and obsessively, is on Hazama. He doesn't even consider himself Hazama's enemy. From his perspective, he's just helping Samurai Flamenco evolve into his next stage as a dark hero. And, as a dark hero needs a suitably tragic backstory, Haiji has decided to create one by force. Which, if you think about it, is a bit of a dark commentary on exactly what the show's been doing since a gorilla with a guillotine in its chest pitched up in episode 7. Hazama's previous opponents, for all their world-ending power, have been tangible. He could face them, fight them. Haiji, meanwhile, is a ghost, a little grey-haired spectre, and he's so effective at this that, for the vast majority of his arc, most people aren't sure that he really exists. Hell, he's so effective, he actually has Hazama questioning his own sanity at points. This is the same hero who's managed to defeat super-intelligent alien giants by punching them into another galaxy, whose defining characteristic is his sheer, stubborn willpower. But Haiji is able to do something no other villain in this show manages. Haiji gets under his skin. He makes him doubt. The analogy that Rob used back in our original Samurai Flamenco video was that Haiji's the serial killer from 7 dropped into a silly tokusatsu parody in the body of a middle schooler.
Open the fucking box, Masuyoshi.
Hazama and his allies keep trying to filter him through the lens of what they've fought before, but the simple fact is that Haiji is an entirely new threat. He doesn't have powers, he isn't a giant monster, he's not from outer space. The danger he poses stems from his stealth, his cunning, and his obsessive knowledge of Hazama and the life he's led up until now. He knows who to hurt in order to push Hazama over the edge. What's more, he knows that in a lot of his previous battles, Hazama has relied heavily on his allies to succeed. Goto has pretty consistently come through with the clutch to save his best friend's ass. So Haiji also works to systematically drive wedges between Hazama and his friends, largely by convincing them that Hazama might be losing it, and also just by going to town on Goto with the mind games. Seriously, this kid's a fucking savage. In doing so, Hazama is forced to confront the assumptions he's been carrying about Goto since the start of the series, that the seemingly unflappable bestie he thought he had is far more trouble than he realized. What's even more impressive about this entire arc is that Kurata and the Samurai Flamenco team have been setting it up since the very start of the series. Haiji's not just some character they decided to bring in out of the blue. Don't believe me? Okay, well let's just go back to the first episode and take a look at those kids Hazama was lecturing at. And oh, look at that! Who's this little grey-haired bitch in the back of the crowd? This is what sets this show apart, my dudes. People complain that it's random and all over the place, but the team behind it aren't just flinging stuff at the walls to see what sticks. They know exactly what they're doing from the get-go. The fact that Haiji is established early and is eventually revealed to have been the one who first uploaded the videos of Samurai Flamenco online blends with his character motivation and skills perfectly. He's been watching Hazama's progress obsessively since the very beginning. What makes a power incomparable antagonist so engaging and threatening is that the protagonist can't just use the same old methods to defeat them. Samurai Flamenco can't battle someone who can't be found and who the police are convinced died a year ago. This in turn forces forces the protagonist to think outside the box, to utilize different methods and new techniques. It forces them to grow and adapt in order to survive, which guarantees that the viewers aren't just going to be stuck with more of the same. This is fresh. This is different. Hazama ultimately wins by understanding that Haiji isn't like the threats he's faced before, and that he cannot win as a superhero. In his own words, if your objective is to do bad things to Samurai Flamenco, then I can't save you as Samurai Flamenco, which means I must face you as Masayoshi Hazama, as an ordinary man. Then he strips off all his clothes during the final confrontation. Look, it's a comedy at heart, okay? Just run with it. It's a testimony to the effectiveness of a power incomparable that, in a show containing guillotine gorillas, King Torture, the president of Japan in a power suit, and an actual fucking world-ending alien, the villain that consistently provokes the most visceral reaction from me is this ordinary little middle schooler doing an impression of John Doe from Seven. It's partly because Hideyuki Kurata is a talented as hell writer, but it's also because Haiji is so distinct from everything that's come before him. In a show that's all about lovingly ripping on the conventions of tropes of tokusatsu shows and superheroes, I feel like this arc is a reminder to other teams creating similar media. A reminder that you don't just have to follow the standard forms of power escalation, that sometimes what you need isn't a bigger, badder version of what's come before, but a curveball that will catch the audience completely unawares. Basically, Samurai Flamenco is the best. Ignore the fucking mouth breathers on my anime list. If you like tokusatsu or just anime in general, you owe it to yourself to give it a watch. Show's great, 10 out of 10. Mari is the absolute worst, and these two are totally shag. Well now, you've made it to the end of the video. This is where we're supposed to ask you to like and subscribe, maybe even leave a comment, which you can totally do, but I mostly just want to say thanks for watching, because you've already done us a massive solid as far as the algorithm's concerned by watching to the end. Not that Rob and I are really ones for trying to make the algorithm senpai notice us, of course, but that hasn't stopped nearly 1,500 of you from subscribing. Holy shit! That's a lot. That's like hype music venues maximum capacity a lot. Also, assuming I haven't screwed this up horribly, this video will be going up on the 3rd anniversary of our first ever upload. That's right, we've been uploading for 3 years, and we've only made about 30 videos. We are really bad at this. The 1,000 subscriber milestone kind of flew by without us really acknowledging it properly, but I promise that if for some bizarre reason we hit 2K, we'll do some sort of subscriber special. In the meantime, cheers for watching, lads. Hopefully Rob and I can get some time in the diary to record some more bullshit for you to watch soon. Because it's that, or I'm screaming at you about Samurai Flamenco more.